Imagine finding out your whole family went on a siblings trip without you, and only realizing it when the airline CEO walked up to greet you by name. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Lyra. I grew up in Oregon as the middle child between Bex, Hart, and Jalen. They were loud, close, and always planning things together. I was the quiet one, the one they forgot to ask, the one they brushed off with a quick next time. Even as adults, nothing changed. I tried to stay close, but they made it clear I was never the first choice. This year, my parents told me there wouldn't be a siblings trip. Money was tight, everyone was busy, and it just wasn't happening. I believed them, even though it stung. I told myself it was fine. I had work anyway. My job sent me to Denver for a quick conference, so I booked a flight. At the airport, something strange happened. The check-in agent smiled and upgraded me. Before I could ask why, Rowan Vale, the CEO of the airline, walked straight over to me and greeted me like an old friend. I had helped his niece once at a work event, and he remembered. Then I saw them, my parents, Bex, Hart, and Jalen, standing in line for the same flight. The trip they swore didn't exist. Their faces dropped. Mine went cold. All this time, they had planned a trip and just left me out. And the only reason I knew was because someone who barely knew me treated me with more respect than my own family ever had. Growing up, I learned early that my place in the family was different from my siblings. Bex, Hart, and Jalen moved through life like a tight-knit team, always whispering about plans, inside jokes, and little adventures they never thought to mention to me. I would find out after the fact, photos on the fridge of places I never knew they visited, stories told around the table that skipped over the part where I didn't get invited. When I asked questions, they shrugged it off like it was nothing, as if I should have expected to be left out. Whenever something good happened in my life, I tried sharing it with them. A project finished at work, a personal goal I finally reached, anything that mattered to me. Their responses were always the same, a quick nod, a forced nice, and then they moved on to talk about something one of them did, something they believed mattered more. I could feel myself shrinking in those moments, learning to keep my pride quiet. Still, I stayed nearby. I showed up for birthdays, dinners, and holidays because I wanted us to be a family. I told myself that if I tried hard enough, maybe they would see me the way I saw them. I listened to their problems, supported their choices, and tried to make space for them in my life. No matter how often I felt pushed aside, part of me hoped things would change. But the pattern never broke. They grew closer, and I stayed on the outside looking in, pretending the distance didn't hurt as much as it did. Even when I felt invisible, I held on to the small belief that one day they might choose me the way I kept choosing them. When summer rolled around, I noticed my siblings acting strangely, whispering in corners, stopping conversations when I walked into a room, and giving each other looks they thought I couldn't read. I tried not to assume anything, but the feeling sat heavy in my chest. Usually around this time, someone in the family brought up the idea of a getaway, even if it was something small. That silence alone made me uneasy. One evening, I visited my parents for dinner. The atmosphere felt stiff, like everyone was waiting for the right moment to deliver news they had rehearsed. Finally, my mother, Mara, cleared her throat and said they were skipping any sort of trip this year. She mentioned packed schedules, saying no one could get away. My father, Clyde, added that finances were tight for everyone and it just wasn't practical. Their words sounded prepared, almost too smooth. Still, I nodded like it didn't bother me. I didn't want to seem needy. I told them I understood, pretending it was a relief not to worry about saving money or making arrangements. Inside, though, something sank. Those trips weren't just vacations, they were the rare moments I hoped might bring us closer, even if I ended up on the edges like always. I drove home afterward with the windows down, letting the cool air hide the sting. I told myself I shouldn't be disappointed. They weren't required to include me. Maybe it really was a hard year for everyone. Maybe it wasn't personal. but the quiet in my apartment felt deeper than usual. No trip meant no chance to try again, no shared memories to hold on to, no opportunity to feel like part of the group. I accepted their explanation, even though it left a hollow space that I didn't dare acknowledge out loud. A few days after that uncomfortable dinner, my manager called me into her office. She told me someone had dropped out of a conference in Denver, and they needed a replacement fast. It wasn't an exciting assignment, more like a long string of meetings and presentations, but she asked if I could go. I said yes before thinking too long about it. At least it would give me a change of scenery and keep my mind busy. Back at home, I packed a small bag with work clothes and a notebook. The distraction helped settle the dull ache that had been following me. I kept telling myself it was only a short trip, nothing special, but it still felt better than staying in the same routine, surrounded by reminders of what I thought was cancelled. When I went online to arrange travel, most of the large carriers were booked. The only reasonable option left was a modest airline I had used once for a company retreat. I remembered it because during that event, I briefly met Rowan Vale, the head of the company. He had stopped by to speak with our group and thanked me for handling a small issue that came up. It was a quick moment, barely long enough to leave an impression. I didn't expect anything unusual when I reserved the seat. To me, it was just another work obligation that I accepted out of habit. I chose an early flight, printed my confirmation, and tried to focus on practical things, packing chargers, reviewing my notes, and planning how to navigate the event. I wasn't excited, but the thought of leaving town, even briefly, brought a quiet sense of relief. I had no idea that this simple business trip would end up revealing far more than I ever imagined. The morning of my flight, I drove to the airport expecting nothing more than a long day. I stood in line, rolling my suitcase forward inch by inch, thinking about the schedule waiting for me in Denver. When it was my turn, the check-in agent looked at her screen, paused, then glanced up with a strangely bright smile. Without explanation, she typed a few things and handed me a new ticket. "You've been upgraded," she said quietly, as if it were perfectly normal. I stared at the slip in my hand. First class. I hadn't asked for anything special, and my company certainly wouldn't pay for that. Before I could ask why, I heard a familiar voice behind me. I turned and saw Rowan Vale walking toward me with the kind of calm confidence that made people step aside without being told. He greeted me like we were old acquaintances and thanked me again for helping his niece during that retreat months earlier. I barely remembered the moment, but he acted as though it had meant something real. Everything around us went still. Passengers stopped in mid-conversation, watching him talk to me like I mattered. The agent looked impressed. A couple of people pulled out their phones, pretending not to stare. I felt out of place, unsure how to respond to the sudden attention. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a group near the back of the line, faces I knew too well. My siblings stood frozen, eyes wide, as if the scene in front of them didn't make sense. Their posture shifted, shoulders tightening, expressions sharpening with something between shock and discomfort. They hadn't expected to see me there, and they definitely hadn't expected to watch someone important treat me with warmth they had never offered. I tried to steady my breathing as Rowan walked off to speak with a staff member, leaving me holding the upgraded ticket like it might disappear if I blinked. I could feel eyes on my back, the weight of a stare I knew too well. When I finally turned, my stomach dropped. There they were, Bex, Hart, Jalen, and my parents, lined up with luggage that clearly wasn't for some quick errand. Bright tags, matching carry-ons, sun hats hanging from straps. All the signs of a getaway they had sworn wasn't happening. Every excuse they'd given me echoed in my mind, each one now sounding painfully hollow. For a moment, nobody moved. They simply looked at me as though I'd caught them doing something shameful. Jalen shifted first, trying to hide a guidebook under his jacket. Hart avoided my eyes entirely, staring at the tile floor like it might offer an escape route. Bex's mouth opened slightly, then closed again, unable to form a single believable explanation. Even my parents stood stiff, guilt written across their faces despite their attempts to mask it. It was almost surreal. All this time, I had believed their story about tight budgets and crowded schedules. I had accepted their words because I wanted to trust them. But now, watching them clutch boarding passes for a trip I wasn't meant to know about, everything fell into place. The whispers. The tension. The quick looks they exchanged when I entered a room. Other travelers noticed the strange tension among us, glancing between my first-class ticket and their stunned faces. I didn't say anything. The silence between us felt louder than any confrontation could. They had built a lie together, and now it stood exposed in the middle of a crowded terminal, impossible to cover up. I walked toward the gate because standing still made everything feel heavier. I hoped they would stay where they were, but footsteps followed me, quick and uncertain. Hart reached me first, clearing his throat like he needed to rehearse before speaking. His eyes darted around, avoiding mine. "It was last minute," he said, voice shaky, like the words were borrowed instead of true. "We didn't think you'd want this kind of trip. You're always busy anyway." I stared at him, waiting to feel confused or surprised, but all I felt was a calm, steady disappointment. I had heard them discussing destinations months earlier. I had walked past their whispered conversations, heard mentions of dates and places before they quickly changed the subject. That memory rose now like a quiet reminder that this moment wasn't sudden. It had been building for a long time. Beck stepped closer, nodding along to Hart's excuses but unable to meet my eyes. Jalen kept fidgeting with his sleeve, glancing at our parents for help that didn't come. My mother stood behind them, shoulders tense, like she wanted to smooth everything over without explaining anything. My father looked away completely, pretending to study the boarding sign. Every one of them carried the same expression, uneasy, cornered, guilty. They weren't sorry they had gone without me. They were sorry they had been caught. I didn't interrupt. I let Hart speak until he ran out of lines he'd clearly prepared on the way over. The silence afterward stretched thin, uncomfortable for everyone but me. I wasn't angry in the loud, explosive way they might have expected. Instead, I felt a simple clarity. They had planned this together, and they had done it knowing the choice would hurt me. And none of them had cared enough to stop it. I felt their eyes on me as I tried to steady myself, but before any of them could come up with another excuse, Rowan returned. His timing felt almost unreal. He didn't ask what was happening, but he must have sensed the strain in the air. His expression softened when he looked at me, not at the group crowding behind me. He stepped close enough that his presence formed a small barrier, giving me space I didn't know I needed. In a low voice meant only for me, he asked if I preferred to board ahead of everyone else. His tone wasn't pitying, it was respectful, like he wanted to offer an exit without drawing more attention to what was unfolding. I nodded, grateful for the chance to step away from the heavy silence behind me. Rowan signaled to the attendant, who opened the lane for priority passengers. As we moved, he positioned himself slightly between me and the people I shared a last name with, almost like he was shielding me from their stares. He didn't question me, didn't ask for explanations, didn't assume anything. That small kindness felt strangely foreign, a feeling I didn't recognize from childhood gatherings or holidays or any moment spent with those who had followed me to the gate. My family stood frozen, watching someone they had never met treat me with calm regard, as though I belonged in a world they hadn't expected me to step into. Bex's jaw tensed, Jalen blinked like he wasn't sure what he was seeing, and Hart's shoulders sank with a mix of confusion and something sharper. For the first time, they saw me through another person's eyes, not as the sibling they overlooked, but as someone worth acknowledging. And that simple shift left them speechless. Walking onto the plane felt unreal, not because of the upgrade, but because of the silence trailing behind me. A flight attendant guided me to a wide seat near the front, offering a gentle smile as she placed a small bottle of water on the tray. The soft lighting and calm atmosphere felt like another world compared to the tension at the gate. I settled in, trying to keep my hands from shaking. A moment later, Rowan stepped up beside me to make sure everything was set. He spoke with the same easy confidence he had shown earlier, asking if I needed anything before he returned to his own tasks. His tone carried no pressure, only the simple respect of treating me like a person whose presence mattered. I thanked him quietly, unsure how to take such consideration. Passengers continued boarding, and soon I saw familiar shapes moving down the aisle. My siblings shuffled forward in a slow line, each one carrying the discomfort of an unfinished confrontation. They kept their heads down, pretending to study their tickets, acting as though walking past me required effort. None of them looked my way. Their earlier excuses hung in the air, unspoken but heavy, as they moved toward the narrow rows in the back. A part of me wanted to shrink into my seat, but another part felt an unexpected steadiness. I hadn't asked for any of this, yet here I was, sitting in a place none of them expected to see me. Not because of status or luck, but because someone simply chose to treat me with courtesy. That small contrast exposed what I had grown used to, how often I had been made to believe I didn't deserve even the smallest gestures of kindness. As the aisle cleared and the cabin settled, for the first time in a long while, I felt something close to visible. When the plane touched down, I watched my siblings gather their bags quickly, whispering to each other like nothing had changed. I followed slowly behind, keeping my distance, unsure if I wanted to engage or simply disappear into the airport crowd. As soon as we reached the exit, Beck started speaking, her tone almost cheerful. "We left a room for you at the Airbnb," she said, glancing at Hart and Jalen as if rehearsing a line. "You could still come with us. It'll be fun, like always." Hart nodded quickly, adding, "Yeah, we didn't mean to make you feel left out. You could still join if you want." Jalen looked less confident, shuffling his feet, eyes darting between me and the terminal doors, as if hoping I would just agree to smooth things over. I stopped and looked at all of them, feeling the weight of every lie and every exclusion. The trip they had hidden from me, the months of planning they thought I wouldn't notice, the carefully rehearsed excuses, it all came rushing back. For a moment, I almost wanted to say yes, to slip into old patterns and pretend it didn't hurt. Then I thought of the hotel Rowan had arranged, the quiet comfort of a place that welcomed me without judgment or guilt. I shook my head firmly. "No, I'm staying at my hotel. I've got a conference to attend," I said clearly. Their faces fell, a mix of frustration and disbelief, but I didn't waver. I turned and walked away, pulling my suitcase behind me, feeling a strange lightness in the refusal. For the first time, I chose myself over the expectations of a family that consistently left me on the sidelines. That evening, my phone rang in the quiet of my hotel room. Seeing my mother's name flash across the screen, I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to answer. Eventually, I picked up, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Mara," I said softly. Immediately, her tone sharpened. "Lyra, you embarrassed the family today," she accused, her words clipped and heavy. "Accepting that upgrade, letting everyone see how we've been lying, you've made us look bad in front of strangers." I felt heat rise in my chest, but it wasn't shame or regret. It was the familiar ache of being dismissed, the same ache I had carried through birthdays, holidays, and every moment they overlooked me. Years of being the invisible one, the sibling no one considered, pressed down all at once. I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter. I'm tired of excuses, of being pushed aside, of being made to feel wrong for existing." Mara tried to interrupt, but I shook my head, refusing to listen to another attempt at guilt. "No, this ends now. I won't be the one who keeps bending for everyone else's comfort. I'm done being pushed aside and blamed for your mistakes." I hung up before she could respond, letting the line go dead. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't empty. It felt like a shield, a space where I could finally breathe without carrying the weight of their anger or their expectations. For the first time, I wasn't just upset, I was free, and I knew I wasn't going back to being their doormat. At the conference, I threw myself into every session, every discussion, every networking opportunity. I asked questions, took notes, and connected with people who actually listened, people who respected my ideas instead of brushing them aside. It felt strange at first, almost unfamiliar, to be in spaces where my presence mattered and my voice held weight. Rowan appeared several times throughout the day, checking in with a casual encouragement, offering guidance without expecting anything in return. Later, he invited me to join a mentorship program he was starting, a chance to learn from him directly and expand my skills in ways I had only dreamed of before. I accepted eagerly, feeling a surge of confidence I hadn't realized I was missing. For the first time, I understood that success could be quiet and unassuming, yet more powerful than any confrontation or argument. I didn't need my siblings' approval or my parents' recognition to prove my worth. Every connection I made, every opportunity one embraced, was a statement of my own capability and independence. I began to feel a growing pride that had nothing to do with them, my family that had left me behind. It was the kind of satisfaction that didn't shout, but lingered, solid and unshakable. Each achievement, each new relationship, each step forward in my career was a quiet victory, a reminder that I could thrive on my own terms. By the end of the conference, I realized that the real revenge wasn't in confrontation or retaliation. It was in creating a life where I no longer needed their approval, a life where their absence no longer left a hole. My growth, my progress, and my success became the subtle but undeniable way I reclaimed what they had tried to deny me. When I returned home, the house felt smaller and heavier than I remembered. My parents and siblings were there, waiting with forced smiles and hesitant voices, as if trying to erase the awkwardness of the trip I had skipped. Bex started talking first, offering an apology that felt rehearsed, but I could hear the unease behind her words. Hart chimed in, adding something about family unity and how they didn't mean for things to go this far. Jalen fidgeted with his hands, trying to make eye contact, as if searching for a reaction that would signal forgiveness. Mara spoke last, her tone soft but insistent, hinting that they wanted things to return to normal, that they hoped I could just let the past slide. I listened quietly, letting every word settle without replying immediately. Inside, I felt the old familiar pull to accommodate, to forgive quickly and smooth things over. But this time, something had shifted. I could see the pattern clearly now, the years of being overlooked, the countless moments of dismissal, and the consistent lack of regard for my feelings. I've heard what you're saying, I finally said, keeping my voice steady, but I need to be honest. I can't go back to letting myself be treated as if I don't matter. I need distance, and I need to focus on my own life. Their faces fell. There was a quiet realization in their eyes, a recognition that I had changed and that the sister they had ignored was no longer waiting for approval or validation. I turned away, carrying only my suitcase and a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. That trip, the one they tried to exclude me from, became the moment I finally drew my line, and finally stepped into my own life on my own terms.